What are the best protein sources for vegetarian and non-vegetarian diabetics alike? Which set of proteins are rich in all the essential amino acids, yet are low enough in carbohydrates to aid in superior A1C and your blood sugar control? I will introduce you to what is known as the protein score. This very important term is what will help you heal your body by building muscle and losing fat all at the same time, provided you're taking your protein at all the right times. Welcome to the Resilient Diabetic. This is the channel we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into extraordinary, well-controlled diabetics. If you are brand new to this channel, I welcome you. My name is Sampat. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. That way you will be alerted when new life-changing episodes have been published. And if you learned something new today, I would love for you to smash that like button for me. As with all my videos, this should not be considered personal medical advice. This is my interpretation of the latest research. If you want medical advice, please always consult your physician. As mentioned, this episode is for vegetarian and non-vegetarian diabetics alike, because I will reveal new methods that will aid in muscle retention, thus better blood glucose control over the long term for anyone suffering with diabetes. So, what has changed the landscape when it comes to diabetes knowledge and research, thus ultimately our care? We now know by the time one becomes diagnosed as a diabetic, 50% of beta cell function may have already been lost. These are the cells that produce insulin, and they are dying, and they will continue to die at faster rates if one continues to maintain high blood sugars. Up-to-date doctors also recognize that if they continually put their patients on high carbohydrate diets, their patients will suffer long-term consequences even if their A1C has been reduced, because that pancreas is already failing and will continue to fail when pressured to produce more and more insulin. As a newly diagnosed vegetarian diabetic who wants to stay true to your beliefs, you know that you're at a severe disadvantage when it comes to protein intake, because the plant-based protein sources recommended like beans, whole grains, quinoa, and barley are also essentially high in carbohydrates. If one is eating the standard American diet, which is full of processed foods and refined carbohydrates, then your A1C and your health markers will initially improve on a strict vegetarian diet. But over time, because it is still high in carbohydrates, the pancreas will continue to fail. This will eventually result in either worsening of conditions or more medications will be needed to cover failing health. The number one correlation to longevity and health seems to be muscle mass and strength, because basically the stronger you are, the more you can survive certain diseases. As diabetics, we already know skeletal muscle mass is the single most important tissue in our bodies when it comes to managing our insulin and blood glucose levels. The more you can retain or even build, the better your blood sugars will be. Because remember, it is the muscle tissue that absorbs all that glucose after a meal. It is also one of the most important tissues to maintain and keep in order to live that long, healthy, independent life free of complications. Protein is that main building block of your muscle tissues. Protein synthesis is the process of building new proteins. But if one was vegetarian, then you have some additional challenges. First, we have to account for the anabolic resistance as you age, because anabolic hormones and insulin sensitivity diminishes as you age. Physical activity and blood flow then gets curtailed. You will need more protein to get the same increase in muscle protein synthesis compared to younger adults. So, as you age, you need more high quality protein to optimally stimulate muscle protein synthesis, not less. Second, where do you get all that high quality protein that does not have considerable amounts of carbohydrates? How do you meet your protein requirements while keeping your A1C to around 5.4 or less, or better yet, in the high 4s? The idea of justifying a diet that keeps your A1C in the 6s or 7s is indefensible and borderline criminal with what we know now. Many doctors and the backwards looking ADA feel that is fine, but it is you that will have to deal with the consequences of impending painful neuropathy, kidney disease, heart disease, and a whole host of other problems that will eventually surface. Their only answer is to medicate you with even more and more drugs. Add one more medication to that ever-increasing list. Why should we as diabetics not try and maintain our blood glucose levels, our sugars in that non-diabetic range? That is where we will be free from all related complications and unnecessary medications. The main questions you must ask, besides am I losing muscle tissue, is what is happening to your blood sugars? Are they stable and flatline all day long? Is your hemoglobin A1C low enough? What about your body weight? Are you bouncing back and forth? And lastly, are your blood lipids being monitored periodically? Are they in line, especially your triglycerides and your HDL? The American Diabetes Association, who recommends an hemoglobin A1C of a 7 or less, which in my opinion is a grave mistake, lists beans as their ideal protein source. But beans are one of the highest carbohydrate protein choices to choose from. They call beans, dates, oats, barley superfoods, giving the impression that these foods will fix or cure you. Your biggest hurdle as a vegetarian diabetic will not only be the lack of high quality protein options, but consuming enough protein to support metabolism, muscle development, and satiety. Are you hungry all the time? Nutritional data shows daily protein intake is well below 50 grams and often between 20 and 30 grams for the entire day, especially if one is skipping meals or is fasting. But as I explained in the episode, Optimal Protein Requirements for Diabetics, which I will put in the description box below, 20 grams of protein per meal gives near maximal increase in muscle protein synthesis. This is now referred to as the optimal amount per meal. I am going to introduce something very important to you. This is so that you do not get scammed by politics and certain agendas trying to make money off your confusion and suffering. You get to see the facts for yourself. The protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, or it's known as the PDCAAS. This is a composite indicator of protein quality used to assess the ability of dietary protein to meet your body's amino acid requirements as well as its true digestibility, or in other words, how well does that protein get absorbed into the bloodstream instead of getting passed out the other end. A given dietary protein cannot fully meet the body's essential amino acid requirements when its score is less than 100% or 1 on some scales. Apart for some soy protein isolates, the plant-based protein sources that have been tested to date all show scores below 100%, therefore lower than most animal proteins. For example, protein in wheat gluten has a value of 25%. Really good quality proteins you want are those that are readily digestible and contain all the essential amino acids in quantities that correspond to the human body's requirements. So, the bottom line, consuming just any group of proteins to reach a daily protein target number in of itself is not sufficient for your health. I'll create a link to the study with all the scores to all the foods we eat in the description box below. The good news, if you are a lacto-ovo vegetarian, then you have access to some of the best low-carb sources of protein: eggs, yogurt, and cottage cheese. Greek yogurt is an impressive source of protein depending on the brand. It can deliver up to 16 to 20 grams of protein per serving. Just always stay away from the non-fat versions. They are loaded with sugars. In the non-diabetic world, we can first look to this well-done study where they evaluated the effects of acute intake of plant versus animal proteins on the stimulation of muscle protein synthesis in young adults. They conclusively showed that in young men who perform resistance exercise, the consumption of skim milk was characterized by a 43% higher muscle protein synthesis rate than subjects who in the same condition consumed a drink containing soy protein isolate. Now that is great to know, but what is the limiting factor? We as diabetics cannot drink any protein-based drink that contains carbohydrates. That in itself will make our diabetes worse. We need low-carb options. Newer studies have recently observed that a significant increase in muscle protein synthesis in older adults following the ingestion of 60 grams of wheat protein hydrolysate, but not following the ingestion of 35 grams of wheat protein hydrolysate. This very important data suggests one solution. The consumption of greater amounts of plant-based protein is an effective strategy to compensate for its lower quality. But then again, too, that may come with excessive carbohydrates, raising blood sugars to very dangerous amounts. In other studies, they show whey protein is around 20 to 30% more effective than soy protein at stimulating muscle protein synthesis. But soy is more effective than casein protein, suggesting soy can outperform at least some types of animal protein. However, in a long-term study, milk, which is 80% casein and 20% whey, resulted in a greater muscle mass gain than even soy protein. What you must notice in all the studies is that they leverage exercise as the main way to retain or even gain muscle mass. So, the very best thing you can do as a vegetarian diabetic is to leverage resistance training or weight training. We have already discussed cardio and its severe limitations. If cardio is your only exercise, then it does very little in terms of helping you retain all of those very important type 2 muscle fibers. These are those specific muscle fibers that suck up all of that glucose or blood sugars after you've eaten, and it increases your sensitivity to insulin. It is also what is responsible for your flexibility, your strength, thus your independence from others as you age. You start to naturally lose those important type 2 muscle fibers when you're in your 30s and 40s. Yes, that young, especially if you're not eating enough high quality protein on a daily basis. Subsequently, your muscle losses will accelerate at even a higher rate. Weight training elevates the rate at which protein you eat gets incorporated into those type 2 muscle fibers. When the two are combined, that is resistance type exercise and the consumption of a high quality protein intake, then we are talking a game changer for increases in muscle mass, fat loss, insulin sensitivity, strength, ultimately better blood glucose control, thus your longevity. Now, to tie this all together and find the solution, we looked at this final study where the participants were older adults. The muscle protein synthesis rates were 30 to 40% lower following the consumption of a soy or a wheat-based hydrolysate than with a whey protein isolate. One of the best solutions for a vegetarian diabetic, in my opinion, would be a really good whey protein isolate. The PDCAAS score, it's a 1 or a 100%, as this chart shows. How does that compare to, say, other proteins like tofu at a 56%, almond protein 39%, or even corn-based cereal proteins, which many diabetics rely on as their main source at a mere 0.08%. See the facts for yourself. Now, if you're not familiar with what a whey protein is the primary protein found in dairy products. It is a byproduct of the cheese making process. So, it can be consumed by vegetarians. Not only does whey protein provide substantial amounts of those essential amino acids that are needed to carry out the functions that proteins perform, but it contains an incredible range of the essential amino acids that you will need. Whey protein also gets absorbed quickly, which helps start the muscle repair mechanisms immediately. But most importantly, in its natural state, it does not contain any carbohydrates. That is what's critical for us diabetics. We do not want to see continual blood sugar spikes. So, how do we go about leveraging whey protein? Because remember, one of the challenges we face as diabetics is that pancreas. If you've been diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, then your pancreas is probably already failing on you, and you're more than likely to have resistance issues. We have to take this in steps because protein can raise blood sugars. The question is, how much to consume and when? To increase protein distribution for the best possible outcome, your whey should primarily be taken right after you exercise. You can also add it in as another shake during the day as a meal replacement, but you've got to watch your blood sugars. Over time, as your body begins to heal, that is, you are gaining new muscle tissue and you're losing the fats, those fats which are stored in between all the body organs, inside the liver, and within that precious muscle tissue. That is the actual fat that's causing your resistance. Then you can potentially try some before bed. Protein ingestion before sleep is hypothesized to represent a new, very effective nutritional strategy to preserve muscle mass in the elderly, especially when combined with physical activity. It is at night where the body does most of its repair and recovery of the body systems and heals those damaged cells. Bedtime intake will vary for each and every one of you depending on what happens to your blood sugars, especially during those critical overnight hours. If it spikes, either cut it back or stop it altogether. Then just stick to your whey isolate as a post-workout shake or add it in as another shake during the day. There are some hardened rules to follow. Do not, and I will repeat this continually, do not add any sugars or carbohydrates to your drink mix, especially fruits. You also want to stick to the name brand supplement versions that have 0 to around 3 grams of carbs max per serving. so that each serving will give around 20 to 25 grams of protein and around 1 to 3 grams of carbohydrates. I will set up a playlist for you with more videos specifically on protein and diabetes. And this is critical. How would you know which protein supplement to buy and which ones to avoid? I will even show you how to set up your own test to determine the very best ones to use. If you're on your desktop or laptop, I want you to use the mouse to click this upcoming box. If you're on your mobile device, tap that with your fingers. The first is the link to subscribe to this all-important channel. The second is on the playlist for protein-based foods. So, have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are generally released weekly. Bye for now.